This morning, Hamas launched its largest attack on Israel in years. What do we know so far about the military operation as well as its objectives? The Italian General Confederation of Labor is hosting a national demonstration in Rome to put the country on the road to a fair deal for workers. What does this mean, and what does this pushback from organized labor? What impact will it have on the Meloni government? And in Colombia, there are plans underway to overcome barriers to access to HIV treatments, including a bid for a compulsory license for HIV drugs. What will this mean for Colombia as well as for the region? Salams, you're watching Daily Debrief, which is coming to you from People's Dispatch, as it always does. Please take this time to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Right, first off, the Palestinian resistance group Hamas has launched the largest attack on Israel in years, as I was saying earlier, with fighters infiltrating the southern part of the country after a barrage of thousands of rockets was fired. Reports indicate that over 20 people are dead so far in the multi-frontal attack that prompted Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to announce that Israel is at war. The operation was launched in the early hours of Saturday morning local time and is being called Operation Al-Aqsa Flood. According to a statement from senior Hamas military commander Mohammed Deif, he went on to say, and I quote, "This is the day of the greatest battle to end the last occupation on earth." Anish is following developments and reports as they come in from the Gaza Strip as well as Israel, and is with us on the show now. Anish, good to have you back on Daily Debrief.
Hello.
What are the latest reports, Anish, coming in from Israel as well as from the Gaza Strip?
Well, the latest reports talk about a host of things, actually, and it actually clearly shows a very complicated picture of the attack at the moment. One of the things that we have recently learned is how the Hamas's Al-Qassam brigade has claimed to have taken hostages of at least three Israeli soldiers from Israeli territory. I think the significant factor of this attack is the fact that they were able to, and this might be first in, say, maybe decades now, that any kind of Israeli resistance was able to infiltrate into Israeli territory and actually
Palestinian
conduct an
resistance.
attack. Exactly. Sorry, Palestinian resistance were able to conduct an attack on Israeli territory. And this actually clearly shows a kind of a game-changing event for how the conflict is going to go on from here. Because you must remember, it is always a thing that we remind our viewers. It's the fact that Gaza has been under a very brutal blockade since at least 2005, with some, few couple of months or maybe less than a year of reprieve between 2006 and 7. And in this span of time, you have just cloistered about close to 2 million people into a very small strip of land with absolutely no access to the outside world, and even shutting down aid and medical supplies to this region. And we saw that sort of blockade being particularly violent during the pandemic. And then we have to remember the escalation of Israeli violence in the West Bank in recent years, and especially so under the newly formed Netanyahu government, which is pretty much like a far right kind of alliance that is in power right now. And that violence has actually killed and created casualties of record proportions in the region. And this is something that is very often missed out in the current reporting on the matter. So when Hamas actually talks about the fact that they are conducting these attacks in response to these atrocities, there is a certain context that is very often missed by a lot of reports right now.
Right. Anish, we have, of course, talked about the Palestinian resistance movement often on daily debrief, and one of the things that we have consistently, I think, talked about with Abdul, who generally covers the region for People's Dispatch, has been what kind of response would be expected uh, in after these policies have been put into place by the current government, and clearly this is an indicator of and the messaging from Hamas is also a pretty clear indicator that essentially enough is enough. What kind of impact? Of course, it's still early on, but what kind of impact is this likely to have within the political system in Israel, where we've seen multiple elections, coalition governments not working out? Uh, this is likely to sort of compound and make things even more complex.
Definitely, we are already seeing a sort of a very slow and painful death of democracy within Israel in many manners. We have seen recently how the Netanyahu government is trying to undermine the judiciary and its independence to make
Mm,
way for his government's impunity. And this has literally nothing to do with this kind of crisis that we are seeing in Israel within Israel right now. Has very little
mm,
to do with the war that it has taken on against Palestinians, and we need to actually wait and see how it can actually affect domestic politics. But with the given history, it has always been a situation where nationalist narratives are take kind of the primacy in many ways, and that actually kind of undermines any kind of other rational voices at the moment.
mm,
But on the other hand, as I pointed out, like this is one of the first attacks in more than a decade or maybe 2 decades even for Palestinian resistance to actually enter into Israeli territory armed and actually conduct a proper military operation there. And that has really sent shockwaves across the region and around the world. Even a lot of people are like outside of Israel, world leaders do not really understand how they have to react to this current
mm,
situation. That's how baffling it is. And the fact that it is happening at this point in time when actual violence has escalated. If you look at some of the figures right now, this year until August, Israel has killed about 172 Palestinians, which is already more than about 150 or so Palestinians killed last year on of different kinds of violence. It's not just the settler forces, but also settlers, actual colonial settlers,
yeah.
who are considered civilians by Israel, who are
Mm,
conducting many of this violence and raids, and more than 1,000 people being put under administrative detention. And this kind of escalated violence is something that is putting things to through its limit actually, and Palestinians have been through that, and this is pretty much an outcome of that sustained high levels of violence that has been generalized for years right now.
all right, Anish. As on the military front, are there sort of any early indicators of how widespread the operations are, and how is the Israeli military responding to Hamas's actions?
Well, the Israeli military has launched already an operation of its own, and and they have started conducting air raids. In the case of Hamas, it has claimed about to have sent about 5,000 rockets across from Gaza, and some of them have actually reached as far north as Tel Aviv.
Mm,
And the fact that it has actually created this high levels of casualty and violent victims out of it clearly shows that the attack was quite something in its scale. It's something that Israel probably hasn't seen for a very long time, and it
mm,
pretty much at this point was made to believe that the Palestinian resistance is a spent force, at least militarily speaking. And
right.
that is not the case right now. And the fact that this is happening is definitely and we need to wait, because as you pointed out, like,
Yeah.
this is quite early on, and we need to wait how things are going to move from now. But the fact that the government has said that it is already at war tells us that we might see a massive scale of violence happening, probably something bigger than what we saw in the 11-day kind of war that was imposed on Gaza by Israel, over a couple of handful of deaths, actually. This is much bigger. This is much more significant and impactful. So we might have to wait and see how things are going to escalate from now on.
The kind of retribution. All right, thanks very much, Anish, for that initial update, and we will, of course, have more next week when the show comes back, but we'll leave it there for now. Thanks again. Moving on to our next bit, the Italian Confederation or General Confederation of Labour, known as CGIL, is demonstrating in Rome as we speak, in fact, to put the country on the road to a fairer deal for workers. The demonstration is, of course, for decent jobs, better pay, access to public education, the right to public education, as well as public health, and a lot more. And it brings into the fold not just organized labor, but also young people, students, the youth, pensioners, as well as general citizens who are on the march for peace. Anna Vrachar of the People's Health Movement, who generally covers health-related stories for us, but is sorry, I think we seem to have got a little bit of an echo going on. We'll try to see if we can fix that somehow and go back to Anna in a minute, who has details on the demonstration, both in terms of its context as well as the kind of impact it might have on the Meloni government. Anna, are you able to hear us clearly? And is that echoes?
Is it here?
All right. I think I can. Maybe if I mute myself, it should work.
Okay. So as you said, the biggest Italian trade union confederation, the CGIL, is now marching through the streets of Rome together with an additional 200 associations, as they have announced in the press. So the initiative includes trade unions, but it also includes non-governmental organizations. It involves political groups, peace groups. What they're to begin with, the turnout seems to be quite massive, as the trade union confederation was hoping to receive from the very beginning. And the reason for that is that essentially what they did is they have issued a very wide call to action. So among other things, the demands of the protests are for decent jobs, for an increase in pensions and in wages, but also against precarious working conditions, which have been a very big problem for Italy in the last years, especially for the younger workers. And then, of course, for the protection of the constitutional values of the Republic, as well as the protection of public health services. And here we talk about especially health and education, but also environmental protection, which have all been under some kind of attack during the Meloni government. So essentially, another thing to add here maybe is that while the protest is really big, it's really important. It has been, it's something that the bigger trade union confederations and organizations here have been dealing with, is that essentially they come a little bit too late to the party. So essentially what they're trying to do now is great. The mass movement, the mass protests that they're building are very impactful, are really showing that most of the people are opposing the policies that they're seeing on the table by the government. But on the other hand, they have to be reinforced by additional action. And this is something that's going to be very important in the coming weeks and months, because many people have said that in addition to the protests and to the discussions that the Trade Union Confederation is leading now, they should also be very prepared to take action in the form of general strike. So this is something that the trade unions have not refused. Actually, they have pointed that they're quite prepared to discuss that. It is only that it's taking some time to build up to. But essentially, what's good about today's protest is that it is so wide that it speaks to a lot of people. So it's not only the workers who are on the streets. Again, it's also the peace activists. It's also the youth activists, the climate activists, who have seen the interlinkages between the wrong things that have been going on lately in Italy, and that are essentially eager to see joint action. So this is something that something good that's been that's already come out of the preparation of the protests. And then again, there are demands which are interesting for us following health also, because health is also on the agenda of today's protests, and it's one of the things that people have been singling out as a very pressing issue for the Italian public in the past year or so.
Absolutely, as it is, I think, Anna, for many of us in many parts of the world. And thanks very much for actually maybe eliminating the need for me to ask a follow-up question, because you seem to have covered the key aspects of the demonstration, at least for the time being. And we'll, of course, ask you to track developments in terms of a wider, perhaps, strike action, or see how labor unions respond once the demonstration happens and the government reacts and all of those things. But we have another story to talk to you about as well, which is an important story coming in from Colombia, where the Ministry of Health has instructed the country's patent office to issue a compulsory license that will then allow Colombia to import cheaper generic versions of a vital drug, antiretroviral drug, a vital drug that is used in the treatment of the HIV virus. Well, I guess HIV is a virus. Anna, how did we reach this point, and what sort of, firstly, immediate impact will it have for Colombia, for those who are HIV positive in Colombia?
So, again, it's, I think for the past couple of days, actually, on the debrief, we have discussed very important events when it comes to access to medicines. And what has happened in Colombia recently is definitely one of those moments which some activists actually would call historic. Because what happened is, as you said, the Colombian Ministry of Health decided to issue a compulsory license, which is the right under the TRIPS agreement. But so it's a right that a government can use to make a drug more accessible when it deems that it's necessary for public health. We haven't seen many of those, so governments are not too quick to reach for compulsory licenses every now and then. But it seems that in Colombia, the atmosphere has changed, in fact, and that the Ministry of Health now wants to essentially put the people first and guarantee that the best drug that they can get is available at the best price that they can get. So just, for a comparison, at present, what people in Colombia are paying for a treatment with this drug, dolutegravir, is around $100 per month for the patented drug, when the generic drug would be around $50, so it would be half a price. And some of the estimates of the Ministry of Health of Colombia have been that if and when the decision kicks in, when it gets rolling, they could actually provide treatment for 28 people for the same cost as it costs them now to treat one. So it's a major thing. It's a major thing also because Colombia has unfortunately seen an increase in HIV lately. So there's thousands of people in need of a good drug. And this is basically a drug that's recommended by the Pan American Health Organization. So it's something that we know it works. It's important, and people should have easy access to it. if it remains patented, it remains out of reach. That much is clear, as we have seen in the case of TB drugs, in the case of COVID-19 vaccines, and essentially any drug that we have been discussing here before.
Anna, you pointed out the changing sort of mood in Colombia. We've seen over the past months and maybe even longer, more pro-people governments coming into power in parts of Central and Latin America. So in that sense, will the move from the Colombian health ministry sort of pave the way for other governments and other health ministries to also take a similar approach, and not just limited to HIV medication, of course?
Absolutely. And I think one of the first places to look at is Brazil, because Brazil is also struggling with HIV a lot. The access of antiretrovirals is important for Brazil. And one thing that Brazil has is actually the capacity to produce. So in case this decision by the Colombian Ministry of Health resonates in the region, it would have a major impact on access to HIV drugs in Brazil as well. And this is something that that's essentially showing that things can be done in a different way. With a bit of a bracket here, because of course, most of the access activists that we talk to would say that compulsory licensing is not the end of the road. It's not something, it's not the final aim, but it's definitely something that can be done at the moment and that can improve people's lives in the shorter term. So I think that it's important that governments are finally stepping up to use what they can, at least for the time being, to make essential medicines more accessible.
All right. Thank you very much, Anna, for actually bringing us an update on this important story. And like you mentioned, over the past few days, some really critical health stories have come up, and it's great that we've been able to cover them. And with that, we'll also bring to a close our coverage of Daily Debrief, or the news on Daily Debrief for this week. We'll be back, of course, from Monday onwards. Until then, a last opportunity to invite you to head to our website, peoplesdispatch.org. And of course, don't forget to follow us for regular updates on the social media platform of your choice. Stay safe if you can. We'll see you on Monday. Thank you very much for watching.